Growing up in Scotland as a wee boy, I didn't have a PlayStation. There weren't PlayStations around, internet wasn't around, and mobile phones wasn't around. My PlayStation was the open countryside like this, woodlands, farmland and hedgerows. And it was during those days that my love for both nature, wildlife and the countryside began, and especially birds. And one of those birds is the subject of this video and one of my favourites. It's one of the smallest birds that we get here in the UK, and it's the long-tailed tit. Long-tailed tits are small, cute, colourful little birds. They're very charismatic, they've got great character and they're a great subject to photograph. Now, the long-tailed tit is a member of a family of a group of tits which total a number of 8 that we get here in the UK. So let's go and photograph the long-tailed tit. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to look at how to identify them, look at the habitat where you can find them, look a bit about the behaviour and the lifestyle. I'll talk about my approach to photographing them and I'll give you some top tips along the way. When it comes to identifying the long-tailed tit, they're relatively easy to recognise due to their distinctive shape and their size. They have a long black and white tail, which is much longer than the body itself. They have a black, white, pink back. They have a white head, which is quite distinctive. They have a black eye stripe and a very small bill, and they have a pale pink belly. When it comes to the male and the female, both sexes are very similar in appearance, and it's difficult to tell them apart unless you actually see them side by side. During the breeding season, long-tailed tits pair off into monogamous pairs. The really only way that you will be able to tell the difference between a male and female is if you actually see them together at a nest, side by side. Normally the male would be fetching materials to build a nest whilst the female actually constructs the nest. When it comes to the long-tailed tit's call, in general long-tailed tits are rather sociable and noisy little birds. It's got a number of calls, including high-pitched peet peet, often get a triple trill type sound, and I'll share them with you now. Recognising the call will enable you to know that the long-tailed tit is in the area, and that will then allow you to prepare yourself ready for when they do turn up to photograph them. And here's the call now. Top tip, the Merlin app. I've said it in lots of videos that I've done. The Merlin app's completely free. You can download it, put it onto your mobile phone, and then when you're out and about in the countryside, if you hear a bird and you don't know it, you just turn on the Merlin app and it will recognise it. And I would say it's pretty accurate. Sometimes it can be off, but I would say that the Merlin app in general is pretty accurate within your immediate vicinity. Top tip, springtime. Today is actually falling towards the end of January. Springtime is virtually on the doorstep, end of February, and there's no better time of year to actually go out, find a long-tailed tit and photograph it. And the reason for that is that this is the time that they're most active. This is the time they're starting to meet, pair up and start to build their most incredible nest. If you've never seen a long-tailed tit's nest, it's one of the most beautiful creations you'll see in nature. They are absolutely incredible. They're built up from thousands of feathers, single strands of spider web, and they're woven together. They're absolutely amazing constructions. So springtime is the best time of year to go out and actually try and find the long-tailed tit and photograph them. When it comes to the long-tailed tit's habitat, where you can find them, they thrive in a variety of habitats, including things like woodlands, farmland, heathland. You'll find them in parks and gardens, but the one place that I tend to find them mostly is along hedgerows, hedgerows like you see here. Long-tailed tits will form small family-sized groups up to about 20 birds that you'll see moving through the countryside. And normally what you'll find is you'll find one bird will arrive, and then the next thing a number of birds will be there in a small group. When it comes to the long-tailed tit's diet, they're mainly insect eaters, and what they'll do, they have a fondness for feeding on things like eggs and larvae of things like moths and butterflies. In autumn and winter they will also feed on seeds and berries. As I said previously, long-tailed tits are great visitors to feeder stations where they absolutely love feeding off fat balls or suet fat balls. Top tip, feeder stations. Every winter I set up a bird feeder station out in the woods. Where I am at the moment, I have permission, this is on private land, and I always approach the landowner to ask them if I could set up a bird feeder station, and I've never been refused. Bird feeder stations are a great way to actually get close up to small birds, and the long-tailed tit falls amongst that group, and you can get some absolutely fantastic images. I did a video on how to set up a feeder station, and I'll leave a link for that down below in the description. Okay, what I want to do now is just to take a little time out to give you a look forward to a new 4-part series that I'm working on in 2025. What I want to do is look at each of the seasons: spring, summer, autumn and winter. The aim of the series is to highlight wildlife spectacles that you can find at that time of the year here in the UK. And now back to the video. When it comes to long-tailed tits behaviour, as I discussed earlier, you will normally see them in small flocks up to about 20 birds, and generally, in my experience, you'll see one bird and then very shortly afterwards you'll start to see more as they travel around the countryside. Long-tailed tits have a very high rate of nest failures, and generally speaking, if a long-tailed tit's nest fails, then they won't re-nest again. But what they will do is they will then help other long-tailed tits within the family group. There's an old name for the long-tailed tit, and it's called bum barrels, as you can see from the shape of them as they go into the nest. And there was a saying, and a coy bum barrels 20 in a drove, flit down the hedgerow in the frozen plain, and hang on little twigs and start again. And that perfectly describes the daily behaviour for the long-tailed tit. When it comes to photographing the long-tailed tit, you find that this time of year now, late winter, just before spring, is probably the best time of the year to actually go out and photograph them as they roam the countryside in their small flocks. Problem is with the long-tailed tit is they very rarely sit still. They're very fast. They don't sit still, and that in itself is quite a challenge to try and photograph them. However, as I said previously, feeder stations is probably, if you've never photographed them before, the best place to try and find a feeder station. Set your own feeder station up and sit and wait for the long-tailed tits to turn up. And what will normally happen is you get one bird will turn up, and then before you know it, the whole group's there, and it's quite an amazing sight. And that's when you're going to get great opportunity to photograph them. Due to their amazing manoeuvrability and the fact that they never sit still, I recommend that you use a zoom lens in the 300 to 500 range. However, this is the new Canon RF 200 to 800. I've only had it about a month now, and it's a fantastic lens. Things you need to be aware of are things like, especially on the lens, it's making sure it's set to autofocus. You've got your focus limiter set, and you've got your image stabilization set to 1. When it comes to camera settings for small birds in general, my go-to settings for small birds are as follows. I always shoot in manual, and I always shoot in auto ISO. I set it to continuous AF or servo as it is on Canon. I set it to my highest frame rate, and because of the nature of how the long-tailed tit moves around, the types of habitat, hedgerows, in amongst trees, etc., it can be quite difficult for your autofocus to grab the bird. So therefore, I would recommend that you use single point or spot AF. And what that does is that if you get that single point or spot AF on the bird, your autofocus shouldn't then start jumping to twigs and branches and bits of grass, etc. My go-to exposure settings are f7.1, which is the widest on my Canon RF 100 to 500, shutter speed of 1/1000th of a second. They are very fast little birds, moving around all the time, so you need to be able to get that fast shutter speed to freeze the action. And as I said, I shoot on auto ISO. So in summary, as we've seen, the long-tailed tit is a charismatic little bird, one of the smallest birds we have here in the UK, and they're absolutely beautiful to photograph, and they have some amazing behaviours. Just spending the time watching and photographing them is a pleasure in itself, and the images that you can get are truly fantastic. So what I want to do now is just leave you with some of my favourite images of the long-tailed tit, and I hope you like them. Okay, thanks for watching this edition of Kevin Hatley Photography and how to photograph the long-tailed tit. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed photographing these truly beautiful, amazing little birds. All I would ask is that if you've liked it, could you hit the like button? Could I also ask you to subscribe to my channel, Kevin Hatley Photography? It's completely free, doesn't cost anything. And what it does by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel, it helps me to grow the channel, and it just gives me that encouragement to get out here into the beautiful British countryside and photograph the wildlife and nature that's here and share it with other people all over the world. So until the next time, stay safe, take care, and I hope to see you soon. Bye for now.